After the Argentinians had invaded, to tell me that my crew, selected from my squadron, there were 3 crews selected, one from each of the different squadrons at Waddington, were selected to train for us to go to war potentially down in the South Atlantic. Now, it seemed ridiculous to me at the time. In fact, I was so confident that it would never happen and couldn't happen, that I was down the pub that weekend telling everybody that we were being called up to the air-to-air refuelling, which I probably was giving away top secret information, so don't tell anybody. As you see this great big probe out in front here, that's forward. It was never designed for, never anticipated we'd ever go to war on fueling en route. The whole idea is we would go out to people out in Southeast Asia or Australia and possibly refuel on the way to save one refueling point. We would probably refuel and then land at the next base, take off, refuel and get there in 2 hops down to Malaysia, for example. The outbound plan, I'd say, was for numerous refuelings. Refueling on the way down probably 4 times as the original plan, 4 or 5 times, and then once on the way back. Once on the way back, only because we were full of fuel, ideally, when we set off to attack the Vulcan Islands, and just one refill would get us back to Ascension Island. But it seemed impossible that we would actually achieve this, because the aircraft equipment, there was no such thing as GPS in those days. There were inertial navigation systems which airliners had, and which were pretty good and useful, and in fact the more modern aircraft were being equipped with those. But the Vulcan was so ill-equipped. The only equipment it had for fixing, as we say, updating its position when we were flying over the sea was the sextant. Congratulations, can we have one every night? You know, because just to pound them down. And then what was much to our delight, it was a day and a half at least later when we actually got the news back of whether we had hit the runway. And probably none of you can really see that clearly, but there's
station just down the road. Since it made a difference between 7 and 6 and 12 and 6 a day, I decided to have a go at that. So I retrained as a bomber. I went again back to 97. And eventually, I was told I was joining this crew with an American pilot. Now, I had previously had some poor experience with the American Army Air Corps. Joe McCarthy was an American in the Canadian Air Force. 6'3" and the breadth to go with the height. The insides to be absolutely secret about whatever training we did, and not talk to anybody about it. So that was that. But then the interesting part came, where it was going to be low-level training and low-level operation, moonlight operation. Well, after normal bombing operations, Gaia, until the moment was reached, and then they would go with the Ada and attack that. That left 5 crews briefed for the Zorba, of which we were one. And of course, the Zorba had to be different. A, it had no towers, so there was nothing to sight on. Secondly, it was so placed in the hills with a head on a sack was virtually impossible. And thirdly, it was so different in its construction to the other 2, all with a central concrete floor, then almost pyramid of broken rock, berm, all packed in very tight, and then concrete covering on both sides. The scarf compass swing had been taken with the bomb on board wasn't in the aircraft. Joe had quite an extensive vocabulary, and I don't think I heard him use the same word twice, and he went down back to the fights, complaining bitterly all the time. Fortunately for him, Squadron Adjutant was there when he got down there, and we were supposed to fly along the dam with a port Avro engine over the dam itself, which put the bomb on the water side of the dam, and this was going to be an inert job. We weren't spinning the bomb at all. So off we went, we tried. It wasn't we hadn't practiced that type of attack at all the time we'd be out there training. It wasn't an easy position to get into. If I wasn't satisfied, I called dummy run. If Joe wasn't satisfied, he just pulled away and left me to call dummy run. After about 6 or 7 of these, the voice from the rear turret, Dave Roger was our rear gunner. He was probably the crew humorist, but he wasn't very humorous on that occasion. After about the 6th or 7th dummy run, the voice from the rear turret, "Won't somebody get that bomb out of here?" I thought, aye, aye, I'd become the most unpopular member of crew in double quick time. However, we carried on. Neither Joe nor I said anything to each other, but we both realised, I'm sure, that the lower the less forward travel that bomb would have before it hit the water. And secondly, the lower we got, the easier it would be to estimate the dropping point. There was no question of sighting, it was just a question, if you like, by guess and by God. On the 10th run, we were down to 30 feet. When I said bomb gone, thank Christ came from the rear turret, just like that. Since we had to get nose up from that height, nose up straight away, otherwise we'd have been in the hills on the other side. I didn't see the explosion, but Dave did in the rear turret, and he reckoned the water spout went up to in the region of 1,000 feet. Well, if you consider 6,500 pounds of explosive being detonated at a depth of 25 feet, it's going to move a hell of a lot of water in all directions, including upwards. However, we went circled around and we just crumbled the top of the dam for a distance of about 10 yards. And nothing more. Barnes-Wallace had told us that he reckoned it would take at least 6 bombs to crack that dam. If you can crack it, he said, the water pressure will do the rest. And judging from the amount of water there was in that dam, I'm sure it was right. So we had to set course for home. And I think perhaps, from my point of view, the most encouraging part was that our route home took us over what had been the Mome Dam, which we knew had been breached from the radio broadcast, as we knew the Ada had been breached too. It's so satisfying. There was water everywhere. It was just like an inland sea, and water was still coming out of that dam 20 minutes, half an hour after it had been breached. Probably, it was the most satisfying sight of the whole of the exercise from my point of view. At least we've seen some of the reward for the actual effort.